Hi, I'm Wendy, and welcome to my Heal and Grow podcast. This is where we take a deep breath, slow down, and remind ourselves that healing and growth can happen gently. Today, I want to sit down and talk with you about a question that sounds simple, but touches something very deep inside us. Should we love ourselves or love others first? Honestly, both are important. We are born not to live apart from others, but to connect, to give and to love. But if I had to choose where to begin, I'd say this. Start with loving yourself. Not because others don't matter, but because you can't truly love others deeply if you don't yet know how to love yourself gently. You know, most psychologists agree that we should start by loving ourselves first, not in a selfish way, but as a way to build an emotionally healthy foundation, so that we can love others in a deeper, more mature way. Carl Rogers, often called the father of humanistic psychology, once said, "When a person accepts themselves unconditionally, they can finally accept others truly." Rogers believed that self-acceptance is the root of every healthy relationship, because when you stop fighting yourself, you also stop judging others, and love finally becomes light and free. In his beautiful book, The Art of Loving, philosopher Erich Fromm wrote, "Self-love is not the opposite of loving others. On the contrary, it is the very foundation of loving someone else." It sounds simple, but it's one of the deepest truths about love, because you cannot give what you do not have. If your heart is filled with emptiness or fear, then no matter how hard you try, your love will still carry the fear of being left behind. Let me explain why we should start with self-love first. Because when someone learns to love themselves, they also learn to understand, accept, and care for who they are. They stop chasing validation. They stop building their worth on someone else's approval. Instead, they find quiet peace within. You can't pour water from an empty cup, and you can't pour love from an empty heart. And if you don't know how to nourish yourself first, your love for others will always come from a place of need, not abundance. That's why self-love matters. It's not selfish. It's how you refill your own cup, so that when you give freely, not out of fear of losing someone, but out of joy for sharing what's already full inside you. Sometimes, I see people sitting alone in a cafe, smiling softly while looking out the window. And I think, that's what freedom looks like. It's not loneliness. It's emotional independence, the quiet strength of being at peace with yourself, the ability to enjoy your own company without needing someone else to fill the silence. That's real happiness. That's peace that can't be taken away. When someone truly loves themselves, they know their worth, and they no longer beg anyone to prove it. They stay grounded in who they are. They don't lose themselves trying to please others or twist their truth just to be liked. And they don't expect their partner to fix the wounds they haven't healed yet, because they understand. Healing is something you give yourself, not something you demand from someone else. That's what self-love looks like in real life. Quiet confidence, gentle strength, and the peace of knowing you're already whole. When you love yourself, you stop looking for someone to complete you. And instead, you look for someone to share your completeness with. Because love should never be a rescue mission. It's not about saving or fixing each other. It's about two whole souls, walking side by side, choosing each other. Not out of need, but out of love. And here's something beautiful. When you truly love yourself, you naturally build healthier, deeper relationships with others. Because you're not reaching out from emptiness. You're connecting from a place of inner fullness. People who feel whole inside don't use others to fill their void. They share their light, their peace, their joy, and that's why their love feels calm, steady, and real. When you feel full within, you can give freely, without fear of losing yourself in the process. Because your love no longer drains you, it expands you. But let's be honest, Many of us didn't grow up being taught how to love ourselves. We were taught to care, to give, to achieve, but not to rest, to forgive, or to listen inward. So when we grow up without that foundation, we often mistake attachment for love. We depend on someone else's affection to feel worthy, and we crumble when it's taken away. We try to pour love from an empty cup, but end up feeling drained because we haven't learned how to fill our own first. So, where does self-love really begin? It begins with awareness, with the way you notice yourself in everyday moments. Pay attention. How do you talk to yourself each day? Is it with kindness or with criticism? When you make a mistake, do you immediately scold yourself? Or do you take a deep breath and whisper, "It's okay, I'm still learning"? And how do you care for your body and your emotions? Do you listen when you're tired? Do you give yourself permission to rest, to pause, to simply be? Because self-love doesn't start with grand declarations. It starts here, in these small, quiet moments of awareness and honesty with yourself. Self-love begins the moment you realize you, too, deserve to be heard. To be treated with the same patience and care you offer everyone else. Loving yourself isn't about praising yourself. It's about treating yourself the way you'd treat a friend who's hurting. When you fail, instead of saying, "I'm so terrible," try whispering, "I did my best. I'm still learning." That's self-love, not through fancy words, but through kindness in the moments when you feel weakest. And remember, self-love lives in small actions. It doesn't come from grand affirmations, but from simple, quiet rituals repeated every day. Writing down 3 things you're grateful for. Enjoying a meal without scrolling your phone. Taking 10 minutes to breathe and just be. Saying to yourself, "I'm still on my way, even if it's slow." These small things, they are the language of self-love. They whisper, not shout. They're gentle, but powerful. And over time, they teach your heart how to feel safe again. Loving yourself doesn't mean being perfect. It means holding your imperfections with understanding instead of judgment, because you can't truly love someone else if you're still rejecting the person you are inside. When you start embracing yourself, your strengths, your flaws, your journey, you begin to heal. And only then can you love others freely without fear of losing yourself in the process. And I know, sometimes people think self-love means being self-centered, but that's a misunderstanding. True self-love isn't about putting yourself above others. It's about taking responsibility for your own peace. When you nurture your inner world, you become calmer, more patient, and more compassionate. Psychologists call this emotional regulation. When you can understand your emotions instead of being controlled by them. And that's the kind of love the world needs more of. When you are at peace with yourself, you stop loving out of fear and start loving from abundance. Loving yourself doesn't separate you from the world. It helps you love the world more deeply. When you truly care for yourself, something magical happens. You make decisions with more clarity. You know what deserves your time and what doesn't. You know when to stay and when to let go. You begin to value healthy relationships, not the ones that drain you, but the ones that allow you to grow. And as your happiness expands, your energy changes. You start radiating calmness. People feel safe around you, and the relationships in your life naturally become more beautiful. Because love, the kind that lasts, always begins with how you treat yourself. If there's one thing I've learned through all my experiences, heartbreaks, and quiet nights alone, it's this. Loving yourself is the very first step, and the foundation of every healthy love you'll ever give. It's not a destination, it's a daily practice. Some days it's easy, some days it feels impossible, but every day it's worth it. If no one has told you this today, let me be the one to say it. You deserve to be loved. Not just by others, but first, by you. Because you are the only person who will walk with yourself for a lifetime. So please, treat yourself as you would treat your dearest friend. With patience, with kindness, with care. When you begin to love yourself, to listen, to forgive, to embrace who you are, you'll realize that loving others is no longer an effort, but a natural flow. Because real love always begins from within you. This is Wendy, and I'll be right here with you in the next episodes of Heal and Grow podcast, where we'll keep learning English, healing our hearts, and growing together, gently but surely. If today's message spoke to your heart, I'd love for you to follow the podcast so that each day you can both practice natural English listening and nurture your inner peace at the same time. Because once you change the way you speak to yourself, everything around you will begin to change too. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you again in the next episode of Heal and Grow podcast.